Hey everybody, Martial Apologist here. Wanted to make a video about, because people have complained about me complaining a little bit, about why it is that I really hate social justice things, why it is that I express so many views about this matter. And the shortest and simplest explanation I can give, with a couple of quick examples, is why it is that I complain about communism and socialism. And I do the same thing for a couple of different reasons. Because I think that really bad ideas have consequences. And pretty much as long as humanity has been around, there have been some really bad ideas. The good thing is that in most healthy societies, most people, most of the time, don't all have the same bad ideas going on and don't act on them. But often enough, you'll find not anywhere near a majority, but a sufficient minority of people will have a really bad idea or a collection of bad ideas, and they will then try to... It's fine when they have the idea, but then they'll try to actually somehow enforce that idea for the rest of society in one form or another. And in the case of social justice, to me, it's very similar to people trying to enforce the idea of communism. I don't care if you specifically believe that communism is a good deal. I would disagree with you on that, but I probably wouldn't really complain about it that much if people wouldn't keep trying to spread the idea as a good idea and use really bad arguments and really bad evidence for doing so. So, it's more the issue that I take is when people, especially in authority, or people in the media, or people who have some sort of social currency, whether that be the authority of the government, or whether that be perceived value of worth by society because they're an entertainer, or whatever the case may be. They express certain bad ideas, and social justice falls in line with that. And two particular bad ideas, why I can't call myself a feminist, at least not now, I did for a long time, and then they jumped the shark, is that feminists now argue persistently on odd grounds, such as, and it's not even that the idea is false, but I'll get to that in a moment. They argue on grounds such as, for instance, the gender pay gap. There isn't one. Or there isn't a detectable and meaningful one. Somewhere between 2 and 7% of pay difference between men and women could potentially be attributed to some sort of sexism. But the majority of it just can't be. It just can't. Most of it's just down to individual decisions of people wanting one job versus not wanting another, wanting to work more hours versus not wanting to work more hours, and things of that nature. There's very little that actually keep... There are basically no structures in place to keep women from doing what they want to do. Another one is violence against women. There's an epidemic of violence against women. Well, I mean, there is. They are the majority, probably, of domestic violence victims, and that's awful, and that should stop. I'm all for anything that tries to solve that problem in any meaningful way, but to then suggest that is representative of all violence towards everyone everywhere, which I have seen done, is kooky. The idea that we need to ignore violence against men because domestic violence against women is so bad. I don't think I've seen anybody say that, but the idea is, they want to pour all these resources into figuring out the problem of domestic violence against women, which again, in a voluntary society, I have no problem with you wanting to do that. But they then want to say, well, yeah, but then the government doesn't need to worry about other things. Well, let's assume that 2/3 of the violence against domestic partners is against women. Well, 1/3 of that is men, but there's nowhere near 1/3 the funding to prevent it for men, or to give men shelters. or anything of the like. And some feminists will claim, well, yes, but in a feminist world, they're whatever. That's fine. But you know, the problem is that you're wanting to divert in some. You're wanting to use some form of currency, of time, some form of human resources to fixing these problems as if they are larger than they are. And I have a big problem with that, because then that there are only finite resources at any given point of time to go around. And I think it would be a much better use, just personally, of solving what is the biggest issue of violence in general for society. I think we should tackle the bigger, the most important, biggest ones. If there's a disease going around, and the most common one that is curable is killing the most people over time, that's the disease we need to focus more of our resources on curing. You can focus research on things like Alzheimer's and whatnot later. That's not killing as many people. So, you know, maybe I'm wrong on that. I could be, but that's what makes sense to me. So when you say, well, we need to, you know, this violence against women is an enormous problem. Yeah, it is. But what's a much bigger problem, a more immediate problem that threatens way more people, is pseudo-random acts of gang violence against people, usually minorities, sometimes women, sometimes children, usually young men, usually perpetrated, by other young men. So, if you're trying to lower something like the murder rate, or the victims of violence rate overall, which I think is a totally noble goal to achieve, then you should be tackling that issue at least primarily. And to some extent we do, we have police and whatnot, but no one seems to really want to be talking about the main causes of that, outside of libertarian circles anyway, no one seems to care. The main causes of that as the biggest issue of violence in society, and rather want to tackle all these other issues, because frankly they're more popular. I mean, I hate to say it, but the majority of the people who really want to stop violence usually go after the low-hanging fruit of, we need to prevent violence against women, we need to prevent violence against children, we need to prevent violence against old people. All of these are great things to try to prevent. That's great. I have no problem with that. But when you bring forth, well, we need to prevent violence against young teenage inner-city males, suddenly people just, they don't care as much, because I guess the perception is that they can kind of take care of themselves and they're kind of creating their own problems. I don't really know. It's not as sexy to want to fix that problem. So I think oftentimes that's the case. Now, never mind the second example, back to the first one, the gender pay gap. That bothers me because there really isn't one, and so then trying to advocate for some sort of social or, you know, governmental change to balance out the pay gap, if there is no inequality now, or at least not on mass scale of inequality, trying to fix that non-issue will certainly lead to creating an actual, much worse issue, which would be a real pay gap in the other direction. And that's just awful. That's very damaging. It's much like people trying to, with communism, trying to fix the general wealth gap between people by trying to just, you know, yes, everybody gets the same resources of every kind throughout the whole society. Ultimately, that's what communism strives for. And the cure in that case is so much worse than the disease that it dumbfounds me that anyone would even attempt to do it. And you know, that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. So I'm trying to prevent very real harm, and I'm not always capable. I apologize for when I am less than kind and articulate about the matter, though. I really need to be. I need to work on that. You guys can hold me accountable to that. Feel free to flame me away.